The air in the Metropolitan General Hospital emergency room was a thick soup of controlled panic. It smelled of antiseptic, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of blood. Monitors beeped a frantic, discordant symphony. Doctors and nurses moved in a constant, swirling dance of urgency, their faces masks of strained professionalism. In the center of this maelstrom, there was Clara Reed. And Clara Reed was a ghost. She moved with a quiet hesitation that was mistaken for incompetence. Her shoulders were perpetually slumped, her eyes fixed on the polished linoleum floor. She was the nurse assigned to the tasks no one else wanted: restocking supply closets, cleaning soiled beds, transporting non-critical patients to other wards, tasks that kept her out of the way. The other nurses called her Clumsy Clara. The name had stuck after her first week, when a moment of distraction had sent a tray of empty lunch containers clattering to the floor. The moniker was reinforced daily by small fumbles: a dropped chart, a bumped IV pole. Each minor incident cemented her reputation. She was a ghost who occasionally knocked things over. Clara didn't mind, or rather, she had trained herself not to mind. The anonymity was a shield. The menial work was a penance. She had come to Metropolitan General seeking quiet, a place where the loudest sound was a code blue alert, not the thumping rotors of a Pave Hawk helicopter or the deafening crack of rifle fire. She just wanted to be invisible. A faint, silvery scar traced a line from just below her ear to the sharp angle of her jaw. It was usually hidden by her mousy brown hair, but sometimes, when she turned her head just so, it would catch the harsh fluorescent light. A pale whisper of a past she was desperate to forget. She would unconsciously touch it, a phantom ache that had nothing to do with the long-healed tissue. "Reed, my office, now!" The voice cut through the ER's din like a shard of glass. It was a voice that didn't need to be raised to command absolute, terrified obedience. It belonged to Dr. Alistair Finch, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Finch was a god in this domain, and he knew it. He was tall, impeccably dressed in tailored scrubs that seemed immune to the stains and splatters of the trade, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. His surgical skill was legendary, his hands capable of miracles. But his soul, Clara thought, was a barren wasteland of arrogance and contempt. He moved through the ER not as a healer, but as a king surveying an untidy kingdom. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. A summons to Finch's office was never good. She scurried after him, keeping her head down, feeling the familiar burn of eyes on her back. She could hear the snickers from a pair of residents, Finch's loyal sycophants, who orbited him like pilot fish around a great white shark. His office was an extension of himself, cold, sterile, and expensive. A large mahogany desk dominated the space, a single, perfect orchid sitting on its polished surface. Finch didn't invite her to sit. He stood behind the desk, his fingers steepled, his eyes boring into her. "I have reviewed your performance reports for the last 6 months, Nurse Reed," he began, his tone dripping with disdain. "They are, to put it mildly, abysmal. You are slow. You are inefficient. You are, frankly, a liability." Clara stared at a spot on the floor just past his expensive leather shoes. "I'm sorry, doctor. I'm trying my best." Her voice was a mouse-like squeak. "Your best is pathetic," he snapped. "This is a level 1 trauma center, not a convalescent home for the emotionally fragile. I run the finest emergency department on the East Coast. I will not have it dragged down by mediocrity." He picked up a pen, tapping it against the desk, the sound like a tiny hammer chipping away at her composure. "I have decided that your presence in the active trauma bay is no longer tenable. You are a hazard." Clara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. "Dr. Finch, please. I need this job." A cruel smirk touched his lips. "Oh, you can keep your job. For now. But your duties are being reassigned. From this moment on, you are forbidden from entering the main ER floor during a trauma alert. You will be confined to administrative tasks, patient transport, and sanitation duties. You will handle paperwork. You will change bedpans. You will clean up messes. Is that clear?" It was a public execution, delivered in private. He was stripping her of her core duties, branding her as untouchable, useless. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She nodded, unable to speak. "Good," he said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "Now get out, and try not to trip over the door on your way." As she walked back out into the ER, the news seemed to have traveled ahead of her. The residents were smirking openly now. A senior nurse, one who had always been curt with her, pointedly handed her a mop and bucket. "Room 3 needs a full wipe down. Someone was sick." Only one person met her gaze with sympathy. Maya, a young nurse just out of school, gave her a small, pained look. But she said nothing. No one ever said anything against Dr. Finch. Clara took the mop. Her hands, which had once sutured a severed artery under enemy fire in the back of a bucking helicopter, closed around the cold metal handle. Her fingers, which had intubated a patient in near total darkness with practiced ease, trembled slightly. She shuffled toward room 3, the ghost of Metropolitan General, now officially relegated to haunting the background. For the next 2 weeks, Clara existed in the margins. She filed mountains of paperwork in a windowless basement office. She pushed laundry carts down long, empty corridors in the dead of night. She learned the rhythms of the hospital from the bottom up, the clanking of the service elevators, the hum of the floor polishers, the whispered gossip of the cleaning staff. She saw Dr. Finch only from a distance, a fleeting glimpse of his tailored scrubs as he swept through the ward, a conquering hero after a successful surgery. He never acknowledged her existence. She was less than a ghost to him now. She was nothing. The demotion was a deep, throbbing wound, but a part of her, a dark and weary part, was almost grateful. The paperwork was mindless. The cleaning was simple. It required no decisions. No one's life was in her hands. Here, in the quiet solitude of the hospital's underbelly, the ghosts of her past were quieter too. The screams were fainter. The faces of the men she couldn't save were blurrier. She was organizing a supply closet, counting boxes of gauze, when the overhead speakers crackled to life. "Mass casualty incident incoming. Multi-vehicle pileup on the I-95. All hands to the ER. Repeat, all hands to the ER." Clara froze. Her banishment from the ER floor was absolute. But the call was for all hands. For a fleeting moment, the old instincts flared, the surge of adrenaline, the mental checklist of triage priorities. She could feel the muscle memory in her hands, the urge to move, to help. She crushed it down. She was clumsy Clara. She was the paperwork nurse. She had her orders. She deliberately turned back to the shelf and picked up another box of gauze, her movements slow, methodical. But her ears were straining, listening to the rising tide of chaos from the floor above. The wail of sirens grew from a distant cry to a deafening scream, one after another, an unbroken chain of disaster. The ER exploded. Gurneys crashed through the ambulance bay doors, a relentless tide of broken bodies and panicked cries. The scene was pure pandemonium, a canvas of red and white, blood-soaked sheets, and the stark white coats of the staff. Finch stood in the center of it all, a maestro conducting a symphony of carnage. "Get me a chest tube in Bay 1. Where's ortho for the compound fracture in 3? I need a CBC, chem panel, and crossmatch for the Jane Doe in 5. Move, people, move!" His voice was a whip, cracking over the heads of the frantic staff. Among the flood of victims was a man on a backboard, his face obscured by blood and grime. He had been pulled from a crushed sedan that was barely recognizable as a car. He had no ID, no wallet, nothing. He was just another John Doe. He was covered in lacerations and contusions. An initial assessment showed 2 broken ribs, a possible concussion, and signs of internal bleeding. He was another piece of meat for the grinder, another body to be stabilized and shipped off to surgery or the morgue. Finch did a 30-second assessment, his eyes scanning the man's body with practiced efficiency. He saw the obvious, life-threatening trauma. "Classic deceleration injuries," he barked to a resident. "He's bleeding into his abdomen. Prep him for an exploratory laparotomy. Put him on the board for surgery after the multi-trauma in Bay 2. The resident pointed a gloved finger. "Doctor, what about this? On his neck." Finch glanced down. On the side of the man's neck, almost hidden by the blood, was a tiny, precise puncture wound. It was no bigger than the tip of a ballpoint pen, with an odd, star-shaped pattern of bruising around it. It looked completely out of place among the jagged, violent tears from the crash. Finch scoffed. A piece of glass, a shard of plastic from the dashboard. It's irrelevant. Focus on the internal bleeding. That's what's going to kill him. Now move. He dismissed the detail with a wave of his hand, his ego already moving on to the next, more interesting puzzle. The delay for surgery was a death sentence, but Finch didn't know it. He saw a routine trauma, and his hubris blinded him to the truth. Down in the basement, Clara was inputting patient intake data into the system, a task delegated to her to free up the admissions clerks. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, the one task where her fumbling incompetence seemed to vanish. The data entry was automatic, her mind a million miles away, imagining the chaos upstairs. Then John Doe's file appeared on her screen. She scanned the initial report from the paramedics, the vitals, the preliminary diagnosis from Finch. Her eyes snagged on a single line in the EMT's notes. Small, atypical puncture wound, noted on left lateral neck. Minimal bleeding. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, pierced the dull fog of her self-imposed exile. She pulled up the live feed of his vitals from the monitor in Bay 5. Her breath caught in her throat. The numbers were all wrong. For a man with suspected massive internal bleeding, his heart rate wasn't tachycardic. It was plunging. Bradycardia. His blood pressure was oscillating wildly, not dropping steadily. And his pupils, according to the nurse's latest note, were sluggish and showing a paradoxical reaction to light. This wasn't shock from blood loss. This wasn't a head injury. This was something else. Something she had seen before. Her mind flashed back to a dusty, sun-baked village in Afghanistan. A special forces operator, ambushed. A tiny flechette dart, fired from a silent air gun. He had presented with the same bizarre constellation of symptoms. Atypical bradycardia. Neurological collapse. They had thought it was a heart attack, until she found the tiny wound hidden in his hairline. It was a neurotoxin. A sophisticated, fast-acting compound designed to mimic other conditions until it was too late. And the standard pre-op medications for a trauma patient, especially certain paralytics and anesthetics, would act as a catastrophic accelerant, causing complete respiratory and cardiac arrest within minutes. Finch had ordered surgery. He was going to kill him. For a moment, Clara was paralyzed. She saw Finch's face in her mind, his sneer, his utter contempt for her. "You are forbidden from entering the main ER floor." His words echoed in her ears. To go up there was to defy a direct order from the chief of surgery. It was professional suicide. He wouldn't just fire her, he would destroy her. He would have her arrested. Then she saw another face, the young soldier in Afghanistan. She remembered the frantic, desperate fight to save him, the race against a poison she barely understood. She had won that fight. She looked at the screen, at the descending numbers of John Doe's life. He was a person, a life, and Finch, in his arrogance, was about to extinguish it. The ghost of Metropolitan General made a decision. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly in the silent office. The hesitation was gone. The slump in her shoulders straightened. A new light burned in her eyes, a cold, hard flame that had been banked for years. Clumsy Clara was gone, and in her place was someone else entirely. She didn't run. She moved with a focused, ground-eating stride that carried her up the back stairwell, 2 steps at a time. She bypassed the main entrance to the ER, using a service corridor to emerge near the crash carts. The controlled chaos was even more intense now. No one noticed her. She was still a ghost, but now she was a ghost with a purpose. She saw Finch across the room, berating a nurse over a mislabeled blood vial. She saw John Doe in Bay 5, a junior nurse named Amy preparing a syringe at his bedside. "What's that?" Clara's voice was low, but it cut through the noise with an authority that made Amy jump. "It's the pre-op sedative Dr. Finch ordered," Amy said, flustered. "For the John Doe." "Don't give it to him," Clara commanded. Amy stared at her, bewildered. "But Dr. Finch said—" "I don't care what he said. It will kill him." Just then, Finch turned, his eyes locking onto Clara. A flash of disbelief, then pure, undiluted rage transformed his features. "Reed! I gave you an order. You are not to be on this floor. I want you out of my hospital," he roared, striding towards them. He turned to the terrified junior nurse. "Amy, Administer that sedative now. That is a direct order. This was the line, the point of no return. Finch was ordering her to stand by and watch a man die. Amy's hand trembled as she moved the syringe toward the patient's IV port. Clara moved. It wasn't a clumsy stumble. It was an explosion of fluid, economical motion. In one smooth movement, she stepped in front of Amy, her hand closing gently but immovably over the nurse's wrist. Her other hand plucked the syringe from Amy's grasp. The entire exchange took less than a second. Amy stared at her empty hand, then at Clara, her mouth agape. Finch stopped dead, his face purple with fury. "What do you think you're doing?" Clara didn't answer him. Her focus was absolute. She tossed the lethal sedative into a Sharps container. Her eyes scanned the top of the nearest crash cart, her mind a high-speed computer. She saw what she needed. A multi-dose vial of atropine. But she needed a specific concentration, a variant used for organophosphate poisoning, not the standard cardiac dose. It was rarely used, but always stocked on Cart 3. She knew the hospital's inventory by heart from her weeks of restocking. She spun, grabbed the correct vial, snapped the top off with her thumb, drew a precise dose into a fresh syringe, and plunged it into John Doe's IV port. All in under 5 seconds. "Security!" Finch screamed, his voice cracking with rage. "Security! Get her out of here!" Clara ignored him. She unlocked the wheels on John Doe's gurney, disconnected his monitor from the wall unit, leaving the portable sensors attached, and began pushing him out of the bay. "She's lost her mind. She's kidnapping a patient," Finch shrieked. 2 burly security guards, responding to the call, moved to intercept her. They were big, but they were hospital security, used to dealing with confused elderly patients or angry family members. They were not prepared for Clara. The first guard grabbed her arm. "Ma'am, you need to stop." Clara didn't even look at him. She shifted her weight, twisted her body, and used his own momentum against him. The guard found himself spun around, his hands suddenly free, stumbling into a supply cart. It was a simple, non-violent redirection, executed with blinding speed. The second guard lunged for the gurney. Clara planted her foot, swung the gurney sideways to block him, then shoved it hard down a side corridor leading to the observation rooms. She turned to face the guards, placing herself between them and her patient. Her stance was balanced, her hands held loosely at her sides. There was no fear in her eyes, only a chilling, absolute resolve. "Don't touch my patient," she said, and her voice was no longer a squeak. It was flat, cold, and utterly commanding. The guards hesitated, stunned by the sudden transformation. In that moment of hesitation, Dr. Ben Carter, a senior physician who had always been quietly uncomfortable with Finch's cruelty, stepped forward. "What's going on?" Finch pointed a trembling finger at Clara. "She's insane. She assaulted a nurse, ignored my orders, and administered an unauthorized drug. She's a menace. I want her arrested." The guards, emboldened by Finch's authority, moved in again. Clara braced herself. But this time, they grabbed her arms, pinning them behind her back. The fight was over. She had bought her patient a few precious minutes, but she had lost. Finch strode up to her, his face inches from hers, his breath hot with fury. "You are finished," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "When I am done with you, you won't be able to get a job cleaning toilets. I will personally see your license revoked and that you face criminal charges." He spun on his heel. "Get her out of my hospital. Now. And somebody go reverse whatever that lunatic gave to my patient." The guards dragged a compliant Clara through the ER. The staff stared, a mixture of shock, fear, and for a few, a tiny spark of awe. Maya, the young nurse, watched with tears in her eyes. Dr. Carter watched with a deep, furrowed brow of shame and regret. He knew something was wrong, but he stayed silent. They didn't stop at security. They dragged her straight to the front entrance. One of the guards roughly took her ID badge, used a pair of scissors to cut it in half, and threw the pieces at her feet on the wet pavement. "You're banned from the premises. Don't come back," he grunted. The automatic doors slid shut behind her, leaving her standing in the cold, pouring rain. Her thin scrubs were soaked in seconds. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, hollow ache. She had failed. She had broken every rule, sacrificed her career, her livelihood, all for a stranger. And for what? Finch would just reverse the antidote. The man would still die. And she was left with nothing. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, and began to walk, with no destination in mind, the rain washing over her like a final, cold judgment. An hour bled into the next. The rain had slowed to a miserable, gray drizzle. Clara found herself on a bench at a deserted bus stop, her body numb with cold, her mind a hollow shell. The fight had gone out of her. She was just a wet, fired nurse on the side of a busy road. It was over. Then she heard it. It started as a low thrumming, a vibration she felt in her teeth more than she heard with her ears. It was a sound she knew in her bones, a sound that haunted her nightmares and defined a lifetime she had tried to bury. The sound of heavy-lift military helicopters. She looked up. Plunging out of the low cloud cover were not one, but two sleek black helicopters. They weren't news choppers or police air units. They were Sikorsky HH-60 Pavehawks, the special operations variant of the Black Hawk, bristling with antennas and sensors. They moved with a terrifying grace and power. They didn't circle. They descended. Directly towards the highway in front of the hospital. Cars screeched to a halt, drivers staring in disbelief as the lead helicopter flared and touched down on the wet asphalt with impossible precision, its rotor wash blasting water and debris in every direction. The second chopper took up a holding pattern directly overhead, a menacing guardian angel. The side door of the landed helicopter slid open. Ropes snaked down, and a team of soldiers in full tactical gear rappelled to the ground. They moved with the frightening efficiency of true professionals, forming a secure perimeter around the aircraft, their weapons held at a low ready. City police, arriving on the scene, kept their distance, their flashing lights suddenly looking feeble and quaint. A ramp lowered from the rear of the Pavehawk. A man strode down, flanked by two more commandos in immaculate combat uniforms. He was tall and broad-shouldered, in his late 50s, with a face that looked like it was carved from granite. The 4 stars on the collar of his uniform glittered in the emergency lights. This was a man who commanded armies. He was General Marcus Vance, commander of Joint Special Operations Command. He ignored the police, the gawking drivers, and the chaos his arrival had caused. He strode directly towards the entrance of Metropolitan General Hospital, as if he owned the entire city block. The hospital administrator, a man named Henderson, met him in the lobby, wringing his hands, his face pale with panic. "General, what is the meaning of this? Is there a terrorist threat? A bomb?" General Vance's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Mr. Henderson, relax. We are not here to cause an incident. I am looking for one of your staff." "Staff? Who?" Henderson stammered. "I'm looking for a nurse," the general said, his eyes scanning the terrified faces in the lobby. "Her name is Clara Reed. Some of my men have another name for her. They call her the Angel of Kandahar. I am told she works here. Where is she?" The administrator and the surrounding staff stared at him, dumbfounded. Clara Reed? Clumsy Clara? The Angel of Kandahar? The two concepts were so wildly disparate, they simply could not compute. While the general was making his presence known, a black, unmarked SUV had detached from the military convoy and was cruising slowly down the street. Inside, a master sergeant with a jagged scar over his eye scanned the sidewalks. "There," he said, pointing. "Bus stop. That's her." The SUV pulled smoothly to the curb in front of Clara. She looked up, dazed, as the passenger door opened. The sergeant got out. She recognized him instantly. Sergeant Bull Rourke. She had once put 3 compression bandages on his chest while reciting the periodic table to keep him conscious. "Clara," he said, his gruff voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "General Vance is here. We need you." Clara just stared at him, shivering. "Rourke? What?" "Captain Thorne is compromised," he said, his words a gut punch of confirmation. "The John Doe. It's Alex Thorne. We thought we'd lost him until we saw his locator beacon ping from inside the hospital, then a bio-alert from his implant. The antidote signature was yours. No one else in the world uses that cocktail." He took off his own tactical jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm and dry. "Come on, Angel. The general's waiting. We need to get you back inside." He helped her into the waiting vehicle. The warmth of the heater was a shock to her frozen skin. Rourke explained everything in clipped, urgent sentences. Captain Thorne had been exfiltrating a rogue chemist from a hostile state. The chemist had created a new generation of neurotoxin for a mercenary group called Scylla. Thorne had acquired the formula for the toxin and its unique antidote. The car crash was a staged assassination attempt. The flechette that hit him was designed to kill him slowly, making it look like a result of his trauma injuries. Your antidote saved his life, Rourke finished. But he's not stable. And the man in charge, this Finch, he's trying to reverse it. He thinks it's a mistake. The SUV swung around and pulled up directly in front of the ER ambulance bay, its path cleared by armed soldiers. The doors slid open. Clara stepped out. She was no longer a lone, drenched figure of pity. She was flanked by two stone-faced commandos, Rourke at her side. She still wore the stained, damp scrubs, but Rourke's jacket was like a suit of armor. She walked back through the doors she had been thrown out of less than 2 hours before. The ER was a tableau of frozen shock. The military presence had ground everything to a halt. In the middle of it all was Dr. Finch, arguing with General Vance. "I don't care who you are," Finch was yelling, his professional veneer completely shattered. "This is my ER. I am in charge of all patient care here." Then he saw her. He saw Clara, flanked by soldiers, walking towards him. His face, already red with anger, turned a shade of mottled purple. "You!" he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger. "What is the meaning of this? I had this woman fired. She is unstable and dangerous. Arrest her!" General Vance turned his head slowly, his gaze falling on Clara. A flicker of immense respect and relief crossed his features. Then he turned back to Finch, and his face became a mask of pure ice. "Dr. Finch," the general said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are relieved of all medical authority regarding the patient you know as John Doe, who is in fact Captain Alex Thorne of the United States Army, effective immediately." He gestured to Clara. "Nurse Clara Reed is now in command of his care. She will have anything she requires. My men will ensure her orders are followed. As for you, your access to this floor, and to Captain Thorne, is revoked. I suggest you return to your office and stay there." Finch stared, sputtering, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. His authority, the very core of his identity, had been publicly and completely stripped from him by a power so far beyond his comprehension that he could only stand there, shaking with impotent rage, as Clara walked past him without a single glance. Clara pushed through the stunned staff and entered the small observation room where she had hidden Thorne. A resident was at his side, about to administer a drug to counteract the atropine. "Stop," Clara said. The resident froze, syringe in hand. Clara moved to the bedside. Thorne's vitals were erratic again. Finch's interference was already hurting him. "Get out," she said to the resident, her voice sharp. The young doctor fled without a word. General Vance and Rourke stood guard at the door. "What do you need, Angel?" Vance asked. Clara's mind was already working. "This room isn't secure. The drug I gave him is only a temporary countermeasure. It fights the neurological effects, but the toxin is still in his system, binding to his tissues. I need to flush his system and support his respiratory functions, but the real antidote is synthetic. The formula is what he was carrying." "He has it," Vance confirmed, "on a subdermal data chip, but we can't access it while he's like this." "Then I need to keep him alive until we can," Clara stated. "But not here. They found him here once. They can do it again." Her eyes darted around the room, assessing, planning. The old training had taken over completely. The timid nurse was gone, replaced by a field medic thinking 3 steps ahead of the enemy. Meanwhile, in his pristine office, Alistair Finch was imploding. His world had been turned upside down. Humiliated in his own ER, his power usurped by a mousy nurse and a platoon of soldiers. It was intolerable. His narcissism couldn't process the blow. It wasn't his fault. It was hers. It was all Clara Reed's fault. He picked up his personal cell phone, his hands shaking with rage. He scrolled through his contacts to a number with no name, just a symbol. He pressed call. A smooth, accented voice answered on the first ring. "Doctor, an unexpected call." "They're here," Finch hissed into the phone. "The military. They're all over the hospital. They have Thorne. And the girl, the nurse who interfered. She's with them. They've put her in charge." There was a pause on the other end. "This is an unfortunate complication," the voice said calmly, "but also an opportunity. You have been a valuable asset, Dr. Finch. Your information has been lucrative. Scylla rewards its partners. Can you tell us where they are holding him? Finch didn't hesitate. His pride had been wounded, his ego shattered. All that was left was greed and a burning desire for revenge against Clara. Observation Room 2, at the end of the East Corridor. But they're talking about moving him. You have to be fast. He then proceeded to give the man on the phone a detailed breakdown of the ER layout, the security blind spots, and the access points from the maintenance tunnels. He was signing a man's death warrant, and his own, but he was too blinded by fury to care. Back in the ER, Clara's instincts were screaming. "It's too exposed," she said to Vance. "Whoever hit him knows he's alive. They know he's here. A hospital is a soft target." As if on cue, the lights on the entire floor flickered and died. The main power was gone. The emergency generators kicked in a second later, bathing the corridors in a dim, eerie red light, but the critical patient monitors and life support systems went momentarily silent. Chaos erupted, but it wasn't panicked chaos. It was coordinated. In the sudden darkness, 3 figures, dressed as maintenance workers, who had been loitering near a utility closet, produced silenced pistols and moved with predatory speed toward Observation Room 2. They wore night vision goggles, turning the dim red hallways into a bright green hunting ground. Clara didn't panic. "They're here," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Rourke, bar the door. General, stay with the captain." Rourke slammed the heavy door shut and dropped the crossbar. A moment later, the handle jiggled. Then a silenced gunshot chipped the wood near the lock. They were trying to shoot it out. The commandos in the hallway opened fire. The quiet of the hospital was shattered by the muffled, brutal thumps of suppressed gunfire and the pings of ricochets. It was a short, savage battle fought in the half-light. Inside the room, Clara grabbed a heavy, rolling oxygen tank. "Help me," she said to the general. Together, they wedged it under the door handle, reinforcing the lock. A heavy blow struck the door, an attempt to shoulder it open. It barely budged. The firefight outside ended as quickly as it began. Rourke's voice came through the door. "Clear! 2 hostiles down. 1 escaped." General Vance looked at Clara, his expression grim. "You were right. The hospital is compromised. We're moving out. Now." He spoke into his wristcom. "Pegasus 1, prepare for immediate evac. We are coming to the roof." "Sir, the roof pad is too small for a Pavehawk," a voice crackled back. "Then find me a bigger one," Vance ordered. To Clara, he said, "Can he be moved?" Clara was already working, a whirlwind of efficiency. She was grabbing medications, checking the charge on a portable defibrillator, and directing the 2 commandos who had entered the room. "I need a Stokes basket, a portable vent, and a full airway kit. Keep that cardiac monitor running. We'll bag him manually if we have to." She looked nothing like the woman who had been mopping floors that morning. Her movements were sure, her commands precise. The nurses and doctors who were peeking out from behind cover stared in utter disbelief. This wasn't clumsy Clara. This was a field commander. They loaded Captain Thorne into the basket, Clara personally securing his lines and tubes. The team moved out, a diamond formation of commandos around the gurney, with Clara at Thorne's head, monitoring his condition. They swept through the ER, a self-contained unit of deadly purpose, leaving the hospital staff and a hidden, terrified Dr. Finch in their wake. They took a service elevator to the roof. The second Pavehawk was descending, its landing gear skimming the edge of the roof, unable to land fully. The commandos formed a perimeter while the evac team hooked the Stokes basket to a winch. "I'm going with him," Clara stated. It wasn't a request. Vance nodded. "I expected nothing less." He clipped a harness onto her. "Get him to the safe house. We'll be right behind you." Clara and the precious cargo of Captain Thorne were hoisted into the turbulent air, the lights of the city shrinking below them. As the helicopter door slid shut, she was already back at work, checking Thorne's vitals, completely focused on the life in her hands, flying into a storm she knew was far from over. The safe house was a fortified log cabin nestled deep within the snow-dusted pines of a state forest, miles from the nearest town. It was a ghost on the grid, powered by its own generator, with reinforced walls and satellite communications. The Pavehawk set down in a clearing, and the team moved Captain Thorne inside, the sudden silence of the woods a stark contrast to the city's chaos. Inside, The cabin was a mix of rustic charm and high-tech paranoia. A field medical station had been set up in the main room. Clara directed the placement of the equipment, her voice crisp and clear. For hours she worked without pause, a solitary figure under the harsh glare of a portable surgical lamp. She was fighting a war on a microscopic level, countering the toxin's relentless assault on Thorne's nervous system. The commandos kept a silent, respectful watch, fetching supplies and guarding the perimeter. General Vance arrived in the second helicopter, bringing with him a tactical communications expert. The mercenary who escaped the hospital was apprehended, Vance told her, his voice low. He's Scylla, and he's talking. He confirmed they were tipped off by someone inside the hospital. Clara didn't look up from her patient. Finch, she said. It wasn't a question. All signs point to him, Vance agreed grimly. We're pulling his financials, his phone records. If he made that call, we'll find it. But that means Scylla knows we've moved, and they know you're the one keeping Thorne alive. They won't just be sending a few assassins next time. As if to prove his point, the weather turned. The light snow became a howling blizzard, visibility dropping to near zero. The wind shrieked through the pines, isolating them completely. They'll use the storm for cover, Rourke growled, peering out a window into the white maelstrom. They'll be on us before we can see them. Clara managed to stabilize Thorne enough to attempt the data extraction. Using a specialized reader, the comms tech carefully accessed the subdermal chip in Thorne's arm. A string of complex data streamed onto his laptop. I've got it, the tech said. The formula for the toxin and the synthetic antidote. Sending it to the lab at Fort Detrick now. They can synthesize a batch, but it'll take hours. We don't have hours, Rourke said. The perimeter sensors had just gone off. Contact. Multiple hostiles approaching from the north tree line. The siege began. The Scylla mercenaries, a dozen of them, emerged from the blizzard like phantoms, clad in white snow gear. The battle was instant and brutal. The handful of commandos returned fire, the sound of their rifles muffled by the thick, falling snow. The cabin's windows, made of ballistic glass, spiderwebbed as rounds hammered against them. Clara never stopped working. The gunfire, the explosions from enemy grenades, the shaking of the cabin, she tuned it all out. Her entire world was the man on the table and the numbers on the monitor. She was in the zone, a place of pure, cold focus she hadn't inhabited for years. It was terrifying and exhilarating. They're breaching the west wall, a commando yelled, just before he was cut down by a burst of automatic fire through the doorway. Rourke and another soldier laid down suppressing fire, trying to hold them back. General Vance, a warrior to his core, had a rifle in his hands and was firing through a window, but they were outnumbered. A mercenary, fast and agile, used the chaos to circle around to the back of the cabin. He kicked in the kitchen door and entered, his weapon raised. The commando assigned to guard Clara and Thorne turned to engage him, but was hit in the leg, his gun clattering to the floor. The mercenary ignored the wounded soldier. His target was the patient on the table. He raised his rifle, the black maw of the barrel aimed directly at Captain Thorne's head. Clara saw it happen in a sliver of slow motion. The black rifle, the determined eyes of the killer, the wounded soldier on the floor, the glint of his discarded sidearm just a few feet away. There was no thought, only action. She lunged, scooping the heavy pistol off the floor. Her grip was perfect, instinctive. The weight felt familiar, an old and terrible friend. She brought the weapon up in a two-handed combat stance, the front sight finding the center mass of the mercenary's chest. Crack. Crack. 2 shots, fired so close together they sounded like one. They were not panic shots. They were precise, controlled, and utterly lethal. 2 red blossoms appeared on the mercenary's white tactical vest. He stared at her, a look of complete surprise on his face, before collapsing backward onto the floor, dead before he hit the ground. The room was suddenly silent, save for the howling wind and the beeping of the monitor. The wounded commando stared at her, his face a mask of awe. General Vance looked over from his position, a grim smile touching his lips. On the table, Captain Alex Thorne's eyes fluttered open. He was groggy, disoriented, but conscious. He had witnessed the entire thing. He looked at the dead mercenary, then at Clara, who still held the smoking pistol in a perfect, unwavering grip. A weak, raspy whisper escaped his lips. Angel. Clara's focus snapped back. The warrior vanished, and the medic returned. She dropped the pistol on a nearby counter as if it were contaminated, her hands immediately going to Thorne's wrist, checking his pulse. Her expression was once again one of intense, clinical concentration. The moment of violence was over. The mission to save him was not. Just then, the roar of powerful engines echoed through the valley as two Apache attack helicopters swooped in, their chain guns erupting in a torrent of fire that tore through the Scylla positions. The cavalry had arrived. The siege was broken. The next morning, the blizzard had passed, leaving the world clean and white. The captured Scylla mercenaries, under intense interrogation, had confirmed everything. The leader of the assault team had been in direct contact with an asset who provided the hospital layout, Dr. Alistair Finch. The digital trail was undeniable. General Vance decided to end it, not in a quiet courtroom, but in the same arena where Finch's tyranny had reigned. He called a press conference in the main lobby of Metropolitan General. The hospital board was there, the administrator was there, and a swarm of reporters filled the space, drawn by the sensational story of the military lockdown. And Dr. Finch was there. He had been invited to give his version of events, an opportunity he seized with relish. He stood at the podium, cool and composed, the picture of a wronged authority figure. Yesterday, this hospital, my hospital, was subjected to a terrifying and violent security incident, he began, his voice resonating with false sincerity. It was caused, I am sad to say, by the paranoid delusions of an unstable former nurse, Clara Reed. Her erratic behavior and wild accusations led to this regrettable military intervention, endangering patients and staff. He was painting himself as the hero, the calm center of the storm she had created. He was about to continue when two uniformed military police officers walked up silently and stood directly behind him. Finch faltered, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. General Vance stepped forward and took the adjacent podium. He looked not at the press, but directly at Finch. Dr. Alistair Finch, Vance's voice boomed through the lobby, cold and hard as steel. You are under arrest for violations of the Espionage Act, conspiracy to commit murder, and providing aid and comfort to an enemy of the United States. Vance raised a small digital recorder. We have a full recording of your call to a known Scylla operative, in which you provided tactical information that led to an attack on my soldiers and an attempt on the life of a decorated American officer. He pressed play. Finch's own voice, panicked, venomous, and utterly treasonous, filled the silent lobby. The girl, the nurse who interfered, she's with them. Observation room 2. You have to be fast. The color drained from Finch's face. The mask of arrogant composure shattered into a million pieces, revealing the sniveling, corrupt coward beneath. The reporters erupted, cameras flashing, microphones shoving forward. Lies! It's a fabrication! A deep fake! Finch shrieked, his voice a high-pitched whine of disbelief. You can't do this to me! I am the chief of surgery! I am Alistair Finch! The MPs each took one of his arms. The fight went out of him, and he began to sob. Great, racking sobs of self-pity as they clipped the handcuffs around his wrists. He was a pathetic, broken man, his empire of ego demolished in a single, public moment. As they dragged him away, whimpering about his innocence, the staff who had once feared and revered him just stared, their faces a mixture of shock and, for many, quiet satisfaction. The sycophants who had laughed at his jokes now looked at the floor, their faces burning with shame. Dr. Carter, the cowardly ally, watched the pathetic spectacle, his own silence a heavy weight on his soul. General Vance stepped back to the podium. His gaze swept over the crowd until it found Clara, standing quietly at the back of the room with Rourke. The real story of yesterday is not one of treason, but one of heroism, Vance declared, his voice ringing with conviction. This nation, and my command, owes a profound debt of gratitude to this woman, Clara Reed. He pointed directly at her. Her courage, her refusal to bow to corrupt authority, and her unparalleled medical skill, honed over years of decorated service as an Air Force pararescue jumper, saved the life of a national hero and prevented a catastrophic security breach. She is the very definition of a hero. A gasp went through the crowd of hospital staff. Pararescue, a PJ, one of the most elite, demanding, and respected combat roles in the entire military. It was unthinkable. Clumsy Clara? The hospital administrator, Henderson, quickly scrambled to the podium. In light of these stunning revelations, the Board of Metropolitan General wishes to announce that Nurse Reed's license and position are immediately reinstated, with full back pay and our deepest, most sincere apologies. She is a credit to this institution. In the stunned silence, a single person began to clap. It was Maya, the young nurse, her face streaked with tears of pride and relief. Then another person joined in, and another, until the entire lobby, staff and reporters alike, erupted in a thunderous, sustained ovation. It wasn't for a ghost. It was for a hero, finally seen for who she was. Later, in a quiet, private room upstairs, Clara stood by the window, looking out at the city. The door opened and General Vance entered, followed by Captain Alex Thorne in a wheelchair, looking pale but very much alive.
"They always called you the Angel," Thorne said, his voice still a bit rough but clear. "I never knew why. Figured it was just a call sign. Now I know." He offered her a weak but deeply genuine smile. "Thank you, Clara, for not giving up on me." "No one gets left behind," she replied softly. It was the PJ Creed, words she hadn't spoken aloud in years. General Vance cleared his throat. "Clara, your country needs you. Not hiding in the shadows, not stocking supply closets. I am being authorized to reactivate the Joint Medical Operations Command, a fast response unit for high-threat biological and trauma incidents anywhere in the world. It needs a commander, someone with your unique blend of tactical and medical expertise. I want you to build it. I want you to lead it." He paused, a rare smile touching his lips. "The commission is already approved. Colonel Reed. It has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Clara looked from the general's earnest face to Thorne's hopeful one. She looked at her own hands, steady and sure. The ghosts were finally quiet. The long penance was over. The scar on her jaw no longer ached. It was just a part of her story. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I think it does." 3 weeks later, a woman in a crisp Air Force dress uniform stood on the tarmac of a military airbase. The silver eagle insignia of a colonel gleamed on her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back neatly, revealing the faint white scar on her jawline, not as a mark of shame, but as a badge of honor. She watched as a C-17 Globemaster taxied into position, its massive cargo bay open and waiting. Captain Thorne, now on his feet and leaning on a cane, walked up beside her. "Ready to go, Colonel?" Clara looked at the massive plane, at the horizon beyond, at the future waiting for her. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer a ghost. She was home. "Let's go to work, Captain," she said, and together they walked up the ramp and into their new life. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content, and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. The story of Clara Reed teaches us that true strength and character are not defined by job titles or the opinions of arrogant people. It shows that courage is about doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. Clara was underestimated and humiliated, but she never lost her integrity. In the end, her hidden skills and unwavering moral compass were her greatest assets, proving that you should never, ever judge a book by its cover. Doing the right thing, especially in the face of injustice, will always pay off in the end. What would you have done if you were in Clara's situation? Would you have risked your career to save a stranger against the orders of a powerful boss? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Have a nice rest of your day.